Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in today's chapter, we'll be learning about dynamic paths, how we can create a dynamic path in Next.js. So if you're in React, we used to have a switch statements, and the one which is dynamic have a two columns and then some parameter after it, and then that will detect our routings. But in Next.js is completely different. So against the structure of the pages folder, which decides how our routing is. So how we can create a dynamic routing by naming a file. Okay, so if you remember in our project, we have an example where we have a list of countries, but when I click a country, I want to have a country details page. So this page basically will be a dynamic page, which will have a path with an ID of the country that I can use later for an API call to fetch the data for that page. So how we can create a dynamic path and pass also that ID to our page. So in Next.js, what we can do in the naming, we can use something called square bracket to have our name, and inside I will add country ID, and you can name whatever you want. So what will happen is when you have a country ID in here, what we're saying, any path after countries, I want to render this page. So if I go and refresh, oh, there we go. It's still working. So I have my country and country there. And if I do, I don't know, d and enter, still my country components here will load. Easy, right? Now, how we can have our dynamic field pass in here, so later we can use it for fetching and API data. Offer us something called a route, which is a hook in Next.js built in Next.js, not like React where you use a third library to import to use for routing. So that hook called use route. So I will go and import it. Import use route. Sorry, use router from next/router. Okay, because I'm using the snippet tool I installed in previous video in my Visual Studio Code, so it's finished for me the statements. So we come here and our function, and we say, okay, I want to have a constant called the route. You can name it whatever you want again, and that will be basically calling that hook. So that hook gives us few properties and few functions that we can access to. One of them is the dynamic field that we have in our route. So let's say country ID, and you can this one also, you can call it whatever you want, equal router dot query dot country ID. Same name we are using in there, so you don't confuse these names, please, because I had that issue before when I watched some tutorials. So this one is the value we are naming in here, and this one here is just a constant you're creating. You can name it anything you want. Okay, let's cancel log our country ID, and oops, I got here something wrong. This is not the router, this is the root. Okay, let's open our inspector, and you can see here, I'll just double refresh it. So it's undefined, and then it's getting the value. So the way Next.js router work, which is unfortunate, is that it could run first time, which doesn't detect actual routing in your browser, and then run another time where it detects it. So how can this be helpful for us? So later in future chapters, we'll be using this one to use to query an API call to fetch country details. I hope that was helpful. Stay tuned for the next chapter. We'll start really building and fetching real data time and rendering it in our browser.